best. Let's bring in Daryl Monahan is joining us. Daryl, retired staff sergeant, is a frequent guest on the show. Daryl, welcome back to the Late Shift.
Thank you very much, Joe. Good evening.
It's good to have you on. And in studio is Ross McLean. I don't know if you guys crossed paths in your time, Ross.
No. I remember Daryl if I did, but I don't think we crossed paths.
But you're certainly following what he's been talking about in the last few months.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the key areas that I'd like to hear what Daryl's comments are on, as I made a mention before the top of the hour there, that we have a deployment problem here with the police in Toronto. And I'll just preface that by saying, we just had Justice Morden's report come out and say that the police board needs to start doing its job, needs to start being more involved. They need to start directing the police a little bit stronger in their objectives and their priorities. So Daryl, my question to you is, I think one of the biggest things we can do is, rather than all this overtime for $2 million for 6 weeks, it's here and then it's gone. I mean, crime doesn't go away after 6 weeks. I think one of the things the police board needs to look at is getting rid of this two-man cars thing. What do you think?
Okay, let me start by saying that the chief's newest initiative for, I think it's basically 35 days, $2 million. It's an overtime initiative. So what he's trying to do is put some more guys in the area, and I'm hoping until he gets a better plan together.
It's a Band-Aid, yeah.
It's a Band-Aid approach, yes.
And it's designed to keep the numbers down because they don't want to. They want to be able to say, and hey, listen, whatever works. If you don't, if it can save lives, I guess there's nothing wrong with it. But
no. In fact, I support what he's trying to do, but I just don't want the public to think that he's got 329 officers more than he did the day before out there for a month, because that's certainly not the case. The two-man car issue, that in itself is a tough issue. I know when I was working at the division level, like deploying officers and so forth, I always insisted that officers break the car up at 3 a.m., which was in the contract, because you had to have a two-man car between, I think it was 7 p.m. and 3 a.m., and then I would break the cars up, and they'd all complain and argue, so, well, why don't we just stay together and this and that. It definitely puts more guys on the street, but I would... Right now, in traffic, I think it's still one-man cars. I think I would hesitate to say going to one-man cars in the higher risk areas.
No, certainly the higher risk areas, you'll want to use them where it makes sense. But you'll cover a lot more territory and make this a lot safer city if you can deploy, if you have that sort of flexibility, without adding extra costs to the taxpayer. We're almost closing in $1 billion.
Yeah, well, let me offer another alternative, and I know this is something because I work closely with it, and I was involved with it. The Police Services Board has been trying for almost 15 years to get rid of the officer's work schedule, the compressed work week. And there's a lot of issues, and one of the key issues is cost, because officers get money put into the bank for hours they don't work. And as well, they're off. They're only working 21 out of 35 days. So if you look at a better schedule, and unfortunately other services across Ontario have sort of modeled themselves after the Toronto model. And what we have now in Toronto is officers are looking almost at policing as a part-time job.
Now, that's something that I don't know if Mike McCormick would have, he would object to that, but
he'd go ballistic.
Yeah.
Because But my concern is fine. My immediate concern is that the officers are off 6 days at a time and 5 days at a time. So if you want to get into these communities, and I think that's what we're talking about, getting in, solving, making healthier and safer communities, we need the same officers in the same communities day in and day out. And I don't know how, and I always found this myself because I was working under both schedules. I always found that when I went off for 6 days, I would lose contact with the community, or I would lose a lead, or this and that.
That's a good point. It's
well, these are the sort of issues that Daryl's bringing up. These are the real points about being able to police the city.
Now, what about having a guy like Daryl Monahan on the Police Services Board, a retired cop, a guy who cares, a guy who's got a lot of smarts, he knows the city, and a guy like Gene Jones, who's the new TCHC guy, and a guy like Ross McLeod, or even yourself, Ross McLean. Some people like that on the board, no offense to the people that are on it, I guess it is offense to them. I mean, they're basically useless, and that was what the Morden report said. What about that?
Well, listen, the Morden report cost $1 million. They hired a lawyer and a justice who basically put out a report that says you have not been doing your job, or you've been doing it improperly. And you know what? Exactly right. We need to get people on the board who know about some things about policing. They know some things about the courts. They know some things about recidivism. They know some things about deploying people. I mean, you can bring in people from major corporations like Purolator or FedEx. They can help you with your dispatch.
Daryl?
Yeah, I'm not looking for that kind of a job, but I agree that one of the big problems with there's a disconnect between the Police Services Board and the Chief's Command and Control section of the service.
But you know what, Daryl? That's been squared away by Morden. Do they have the courage to do it?
Well, that's good, but I think Alok Mukherjee needs somebody, not necessarily me. He needs somebody that was an insider, and when the chief says this is what we have to do, he needs someone on his staff to say, no, that's what he says he has to do, but this isn't really what he has to do. This is an option of what he could do.